Okay, I have 2 o'clock, so I want to be cognizant of your time and go ahead and get started. We are talking the top 5 tips for getting your students caught up in Schoology. So I am going to talk you through what I did. I'm a live teacher in a live course with live students. So I'm going to talk you through what I did for my students and then kind of give you some alternative things if you're like, wow, this is going to be a lot of work for me, so that you can kind of gauge what the best way to get your students caught up is. So right now, we're all aware that with the new grading guidelines, we are not allowed to give penalties for late grades. We're supposed to accept work all the way through the last week in May. Well, that can be kind of challenging if you have kids who have been mentally absent, physically absent, internetally absent for the last 3 weeks, for them to go find all of the stuff they need to get caught up on. I'm very hopeful that some of my students are going to log in any day now and start getting caught up on all the work that they're missing, but I want to make it as easy as possible for them. So last week I started brainstorming, like, if I have kids who need to do 6 assignments in 6 different folders, how can I organize this and then use it moving forward? So the first tip is to make sure that all of your assignments and assessments are saved in resources. No matter which of these paths you want to do, and it might be a little trial and error for you to figure out what's going to work best based on what your students are missing and how many students are missing how many things. But you want to put them all in your resources first so that you have the ability to go back and find them. In Schoology, if they are in your course, you can't like take this assessment down here. It's not like a Google Doc where you could like make a copy inside of your course. You have to pull it somewhere else and then pull it back into your course. You can't just duplicate it right there. So you have to save everything to your resources anyways. They might already be in your resources if you're building in resources like you're supposed to. But to show you in my resources, I have an algebra assessment. So I pulled them all out of these folders. Like I have a folder that's like, here's the week's worth of stuff you're supposed to do. And then in that folder, task 1, watch this video, do this assessment, task 2. So like I have some of mine nested in folders. So in my resources, I went ahead and put all of the stuff for the 6 weeks, all those assignments or assessments in just a little folder. So the ones that my students are doing this week, I'll come back and add to this resources folder. There's somewhere else in my resources, but for the ease of moving things from resources to course, I just created a new collection to put them all in here. Same thing with my pre-calculus assessments. I have them all listed in here so that when I'm putting these in for my students to get caught up in, I have them all in one place. Otherwise, for my pre-cal ones, I have to go to a shared pre-cal course. For my algebra ones, I have to go to a shared group resource. So it can just get a little messy. So even if you have them in your resources, organizing them in your resources somewhere like with a collection. Remember, to make a collection, all you have to do is click this little collection box with the plus sign, and then you have a brand new collection for all of your assessments. So step 1 is making sure your assignments and assessments are saved in resources to ease some of the burden of moving it for you. The next thing that you want to use is your grades. So if you have your grade book set up, and y'all, I don't know if you've experienced this, but Schoology, you know, they had that issue with like moving things from your resources to your course. And then they were like, yay, it's fixed. And now I'm like, no, it's not. So you guys are going to get to see my live course. So no judgments here. But I'm actually going to show you my pre-cal because those kids are a little more on top of it. So the way I've set mine up, I have my grade book set up. So in my grade book, I have all of my students' grades over here, and I can see anything that is missing is labeled as a 0. So I was able to use my grade book to figure out very quickly, like this student is missing these 2 assignments. This student is missing these 2 assignments. So I can very quickly see what those students need. This could be something you write down on a piece of paper, who's missing what. Maybe you have a Google spreadsheet. I have the blessing of having another TV plugged into my computer, so I can have my grade book up on one side and then be assigning on the other side. But you're just going to need some way to know what student needs what information. It might also be in eSchool where you have your grades. That's what I was doing last night. I made sure that Schoology matched eSchool, and then I had eSchool up, and anything that was a 0 or a Z in eSchool was what I was individually assigning inside of Schoology. So use your grades to see what your students are missing. That's the easiest, fastest way to figure out who needs what. The third tip is to create a folder for your missing work and create an embedded page for your instructions. Now you can do this in resources and then pull it into your course, or you can just do it straight in your course. So in my materials, I have a folder that is titled Missing Work. Check this folder. Now I have high school students. Most of them are getting into Schoology at least once a week. Fingers crossed, but not all of them check everything. So that's why I put in big, bold, check this folder. I tried to make it a different color, and then it happened to be the same color as this week, but maybe that'll catch their eye. I put it up at the very top, so it's the very first material that any of my students see. Remember that in order to move things, you just click and drag. So I just dragged this missing work folder up to the top. So this tip 3 is about an embedded page. So when my students click in this folder, this quick info that has the instructions is bam in their face. They do not have to click on anything. So as soon as they click on the folder, the instructions for the folder are right here. Now, I could have also put them right here, like how this folder has these instructions right here, but I don't like how this, I don't like how this font is so small and you can't make it bigger, or at least as big as I wanted it. So I just did a page. So remember, with a page, you click Add Materials, Add a Page. Once you've added the page, you type whatever instructions you want. So my instructions, this folder contains all of the work you are missing. If you don't see anything, then you are good. Okay, so my students, I'll show you what it looks like for someone who's missing and someone who's not. But a student who is not missing any work will click into the folder, will see these instructions, and will see there is nothing else that they are missing. But then my students who are missing work, if you see assessments, you should be able to take any of these. If you want to watch the videos first, please find the previous folder that the videos are housed in and watch that first. When I set this up, I emailed parents and Schoology messaged students to let them know a little bit more about this folder and what's in it, but to let them know if they thought that anything was like shared with them in error, to let me know. I did have one student who was like, I went back and did that one late, and because it was late, I didn't have it updated, and so I was able to catch that, okay? And then in a page, remember, in order for it to be like bam in your face, here are the instructions that you can't miss, I just changed the font size. So once I had my instructions, I changed the font size. Could have gone bigger, but I was feeling a little less aggressive last night. Ooh, but not that non-aggressive. And then at the very bottom, where you see that ABC display in line, I just clicked it so that that is prominent, meaning that my page will show up. Now, if I unclick it, just to show you, this is the default. You can see it says quick info, but my students will have to click on this in order to see it. So I made it to where those instructions are bam in your face, can't miss it, by clicking that display on a new page and then saving the changes. So now these instructions are viewable and visible without my students having to do anything. So that is the creating a folder and using the embedded page. My folder was literally missing work, check this folder, okay? So the fourth tip is to put all of your assignments in that missing work folder and then individually assign the specific assessments to students. So I brought all of these in from my resources. This is the part that Schoology is kind of having a teensy-weensy issue with right now, but I brought them in from my resources, put them into this folder. We're going to talk about some alternative ideas at the end, but one reason that I did it this way is because you can see I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10, 14, 20-something-ish students, pretend I don't teach math, 20-something-ish students that need to get caught up on work. So for me, if I had to enable 20-something-ish assessments each time, that was going to be really overbearing. So what I did is I put all of the assessments in a master folder for the work that my students need to complete. And then I just individually, after enabling all of the submissions, I only had to do it 6 times rather than 20-something. But then, like, I have one student who needs to take this. I don't need to share it with the whole class again. I don't want to go back and enable it. So I just redid it in this folder. And then for this specific assessment, I clicked edit. I clicked the 3 dots down here for individually assign, and I typed the one student who needs to make up that specific assessment. Then for the one from last week, you can see I have 7 students who missed it, probably because they didn't follow my instructions and happened to do it last week. So I clicked edit, I clicked the 3 dots, and I typed the names of all of the students who need to make it up. Notice that my submissions are enabled so that any of my students who need to come in and take this can take this. I haven't put a due date on it, and I did not close the submission, so they have until the end of May. This is nice because I've set it up and I can literally walk away, and my students have until the end of May to do it. They don't have to ask me to re-enable something. They don't have to ask me where it is. They don't have to ask me to share it. It's all right here for my students. So I put all of the assessments that any of my students could have taken in here, and then I made sure my submissions were enabled, and I individually assigned who can see what. So the only things that the students need to make up are in here, and only the students who need to make it up can see it. Okay. Oh, a quick bonus tip for you, I'm glad I put that in there, was when I put these in, I created a new category titled late work. This is more for me than for the students, but here's the beautiful thing. When I go to my grade book, I can sort up at the top by all materials. I can just click late work, and I can only see the late work. Now remember, when you individually assign something, any student who doesn't have access to it is grayed out. So only these students who have the white boxes are the ones who this has been shared with. This helps me see very quickly who's done the makeup work, okay? I can see right here, this student has already hopped in this morning and done this makeup assessment, okay? It's the exact same thing I had, but he had access to it. He could hop in and do it. Let me show you my 7th period. I have a couple more students who need stuff. So you can see anything grayed out, that's that individually assigning. Anybody who's grayed out, it does not have access because they've already taken it. I can see this student has already taken this. This student has already taken this. So anything that's a white box is what the students need to make up. So I can see anything that's white is something that I am missing from my students. So that's a lot easier for me too in the last week of May when the parents are coming back saying, what, my student has a 20, why do they have a 20? I can just say, well, here are all the things your student is missing, right? Very easy for me to see it in my grade book. If I look at my grade book like normal, because these things don't have due dates, the missing or late work assignments are at the front, and then my regular grades are towards the back. So that is something to keep in mind. If you want to put a due date on it so it'll show up at the end, you can. Right now, I'm really concerned with this late work, so I want it to be at the front, but I can also get rid of the late work by looking at the completion grades, and that's what my students are doing this week. They're doing some completion grades. So I just use a grading category to help me see in the grade book a little bit clearer, quick view of what my students are missing, okay? The last tip is to set those student completion rules. So in that missing work folder, once I got everything set up, I clicked student completion, and I just made sure that I went in and selected all of the assessments. All of them, they must make a submission. Now keep in mind, this will only show us something that is required for the students it is assigned for. So if a student does not have to make up this assessment, they will not see that they have to do this because they've already done it. But this puts a little bit of like a neon sign for my students to see, and I'll show you once we get out of it, but they can see what's missing, okay? Now notice at the top, I did not say that they had to complete these in sequential order, because if I have students who have multiple things that are missing and I go back and add to this, I want them to just be able to go in and make any of these submissions. If you check this, it means that they have to be done in the order they are in the folder, but because I have individually assigned things to specific students, I did not check this. Now, this might be something you want to do when we talk about one of the other 2 ideas. But for me, I just have students, I have one student who needs to come in and do this one assessment. So I don't need them to do things in order, and I don't want to mess up the student completion rules, so I'm going to leave it like it is. Now to show you my students, when they hop in, they're going to see this must complete with a grayed out checkbox or check mark, noting that they need to complete something. Excuse me. Once they've completed it, it will turn green and give them a good like thumbs up, you've done it. So to show you from a student view, this student right here is not missing any work, okay? So I put a little update last night, missing work, please check the folder. If I'm missing anything from you, it's available in there. If there's nothing, you're caught up. Smiley face, because I appreciate when people are caught up. So materials, missing work. Remember, this student we are viewing is not missing anything. So when she clicks in here, she sees if you don't see anything, you are good. There is nothing for her to do, so she knows that she is good. Now, another student who's missing some work. This student sees that update, goes to materials, sees missing work, check this folder. Maybe he reads that, maybe he clicks on it, and he sees all of the assessments that he needs to do are shared with him in here. He can click on any of them, and it is open for submissions. Now notice I'm viewing as the student, so I don't have a submission button, but they are all open and ready for him to take. So if he hops in the last week of May and is able to get them all done, then more power to him. So, two alternative ideas for you, and this is where like I'm going to explain them. I might show you just a couple of things, but if you want me to expand on any of these, I can tell you why I didn't go with these ideas. But one idea I had was to put missing work in folders for each kid and then individually assign the whole folder to the kid rather than a folder with individually assigned assessments. Now here was my issue with that. My pre-cal classes are pretty good about turning work in, and I still had 20 missing assignments, okay? So if I had to bring in a folder for each kid and bring each of those assessments in, one, it was gonna be a little more work on the back and forth for me to figure out which kid is missing which work and which things need to be assigned to him. And two, remember when you bring stuff in from your resources to your course, when you bring in an assessment, you have to enable submissions for every assessment you bring in. Now, if you have assignments, those automatically are set up to enable submissions. So you might want to do this individually assigned folders with the work there for the students and break it up, especially if you have littles. It might be confusing to see a missing work folder, but then they go in and there's no work. So that might be an idea for like elementary that might be a little bit better. But for me, because I was going to have to enable submissions 20 something times, I didn't want to have to keep up with that. So I went with my alternative idea, which this was my original idea, and I ended up turning it into a different alternative because of how many submissions I was missing. Now, maybe you have like one or two kids that are missing everything and everyone else is good to go. Then this might be a great idea for you to just put it into the work for those students. When you do it that way, and you want to individually assign a folder, you would have your missing work folder. You would click the gear and individually assign. And then you can type in the student or students that need that folder and then individually assign that folder. Just like you would see it here, there's just a 1, and then anything in the folder is individually assigned to that person. Now, my issue was I had like 4 kids who are missing 6 assignments, and I was gonna have to go through those steps every single time, or individually assign the entire folder to all 4 of those students. Now, both of those are an option, but that just wasn't quite what I was wanting in my catching students up idea. The second alternative idea for you is to set up grading groups in your members for students who are missing specific work, just to kind of cut down on the workload for you. So in your courses, and I'm going to use a course that doesn't really matter. Let me use this one. When I go to members, I have this option over here for grading groups, and I'm going to delete these to show you how to do it fresh. So over here, it's kind of weird because there's not a button, but it turns into a button. But where it says organize members into grading groups, if you hover over that, you can click to create a grading group. So maybe I type in assessment 1 and I click the kids who are missing the first assessment and then save that grading group. And then I create assessment 2 and I click the 3 kids who are missing that specific assessment. And then I click and create assessment 3 and click all my students who are missing the 3rd assessment. You get the idea. So I could hop in here and put little tags on what the students are missing. And then in my materials, when I go to individually assign an assessment, I could type in the assessment grading group rather than typing in all of those names. So if you have an assessment or an assignment that like over half your class has missed, it might be easier for you to set up grading groups, and then you can just individually assign the grading group rather than typing in all of those names multiple times. So I could have done that for some of my courses where I have students who haven't done anything in the six weeks. I could lump them all into a grading group and then put that grading group on the assignments or the assessments if I wanted to. That wasn't exactly what I decided to do, but I could have used grading groups to kind of save me some time. And to get to grading groups, again, you just go members and then organize into grading groups. So if I have 6 assessments, I could do 6 different grading groups, tag all the students who are missing those grading groups, and then go through and enter those for my assessments or assignments. Now, a quick note about this, and the reason I ended up not going with this, is if you have linked sections, your grading groups do not follow from section to section. So you would need like assessment 1 for first period, assessment 1 for second period, assessment 1 for third period. They don't follow in your linked sections, which was kind of my issue because I had students in first, second, and third who were all missing the same assessments. And by the time I created those grading groups, I could just go type in their names when individually assigning those assessments. So those are the tech tips I have for you, and with some alternative ideas as bonuses shared in there for you, because I understand that what works for me in high school with my 120 kids might not work for you in elementary or middle or with the kids that you have or with the students that are missing that work. So if you are like, I'm not really sure, you presented some ideas and I'm not sure which one I want, or I'm not sure which one's going to be the best for me, feel free to ask some questions. Maybe you're like, I didn't like any of those ideas. Do you have an alternative idea number 3? And I don't yet, but if you provide me with some more information, maybe I could get creative for you. So if you want to unmute your mic and ask some questions, you are more than welcome to. If there's anything you were like, whoa, that was way too fast, I can go back and share something. I do want to share before I stop the recording. In the professional learning course, under the digital learning resources and the archived Zoom webinars, we have all of our webinars in here, all of the things that we've recorded. So if you're like, okay, you kind of lost me, like I get the idea, but you lost me on individually assigning assignments, then that could be, maybe you want to go back and watch this, the individual assignments and grading groups. Or maybe you're like, the idea of grading groups, tell me more. Then maybe you want to go back and watch this one, okay? If you were like, okay, I had you until you said embed a page, then maybe you want to go back and watch this. These are also things that I am more than willing to show you again, or your CTFs can help you with, or you can literally Google. But I wanted to make sure you know, if you're like, I like the idea, but I don't know all the mechanics behind everything you were doing, then those things are in here. We've talked about all of these before. So how to set up the assessments, individual assignments and grading groups. There's stuff in here for folders under the design tips. And then pages are kind of the main 4 that I hit. So if there's anything that you were like, I get the idea, but I don't know the how, then you might want to peek in here for some assistance.